So, wait a minute. Let me just check the blather.
I'm going to try to interrupt you less on this episode, Phil. I'm sorry. It's a terrible bad habit of mine.
You're a monster. I don't even notice it, to be honest.
Well,
Only people online do.
You son of a bitch. You're on Twitter the other day like, yeah. It's something that
I know. Because that was a chance to be rude to you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna take it. It doesn't mean that it's real.
But it's a thing I really feel bad about. So it's, I can't.
That's another reason why I'm gonna mention it on Twitter.
Alright, I'm gonna interrupt the shit out of you on this episode. You're not gonna get one word in edgewise, bitch. Your co-hosting days are over. You can show up and experience this the way you're gonna experience all those cards after Jan becomes the GOAT. Just sit there quietly and happily. And you'll like it.
I'm doing that now.
It's actually hard to interrupt you if you don't say anything. To be honest.
My new tactic.
It's just to not say anything on the podcast.
Yeah, well, I feel like we should have just a passive aggressive fight on the podcast.
Just the idea. I don't think the passive aggression would even come through if you literally just don't respond. People will just think your internet shit out.
That's true. I don't have the historical framework to be working for here.
Yeah. All right, welcome to yet another episode of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor Rebush. With me, as always, is Phil McKenzie. Yes, Phil, we're still doing it. Unlike Anderson Silva, maybe, who kind of retired, or Dana White, doesn't want to let him fight again, which is cool, I guess. It was an emotionally confusing weekend, I think, for lots of MMA fans who grew up admiring and some even idolizing Anderson Silva, who truly did do basically everything I think we expected him to do, and even our prediction, Phil, of him hurting Uriah Hall and then Uriah Hall being forced to accidentally finish him, that came true too. I don't think Uriah Hall wanted to do that. I think his hand was forced. So just to give you guys a quick rundown of what we're going to be talking about on the show today, we are going to lead with Silva Hall. We want a chance to talk about Anderson Silva's legacy, the still tenuous comparison between him and men like Uriah Hall and others. After that, we are going to jump into our previews. Next week is Thiago Santos versus Glover Teixeira. Maybe not quite as enticing as it was before Adesanya versus Blachowicz was announced, but still truly a wonderful old man's fight. We're also going to talk, I think, about Raoni Barcelos. He's fighting Khalid Taha on this card. Barcelos is guaranteed action fighter. I love him, and I don't think we've really talked about him on Heavy Hands before, so it'll be a good chance to do that. Our boy Ian Heinisch, Strong Belwas, is fighting Brendan Allen, who may be for middleweight what Bryce Mitchell is turning out to be for featherweight, which is to say, just like a slightly worse Khabib, which means still a really damn good fighter. And I think that's about all we're going to cover in preview. And then we're going to just hit up, the aforementioned Mitchell versus Feely from last weekend and anything else that catches our eye. And any of that you just heard me lay out that you don't hear on this episode, sign up for the Patreon because it's been cut into a bonus episode. All right, Phil. Anderson. Uriah. Two Anderson Silvas fighting each other. Did anything surprise you at all about how this fight played out?
No.
Right.
I mean, this is one of the ones where, yeah, as a synthesis, we just kind of nailed this one completely.
I agree. Yeah, it happens rarely, but I feel like for us, Phil, it really comes down to us having a full, I think, psychological profile of the two fighters in question, knowing how they will respond to various stresses. So yeah,
Also, do you ever find yourself wondering that maybe we're just really good at picking really bad fights?
Yeah. No,
like all our time spent on the depressed us.
Yep.
Like some of our best
Yeah.
picks and most accurate analyses are for trash.
Yeah,
Jack, no one should be interested in.
Jack Slack got all that clout for talking about lever punching just before Weidman knocked out Silva. That was like one of his big moments of everyone was like, "Oh, analysis can be predictive." Ours is predicting that Lewis Ngannou was going to suck.
Yeah.
That's our claim to fame. But we were
right. Or
like
just being like, oh yeah, this Thiago Santos guy, you can see him like doing ballerina moves into falling over against Jimmy Manuwa. But he's probably going to beat John Jones, or at least give him a tough as hell fight.
Yeah.
Because John Jones isn't actually that good.
Yeah, the fight for us to be smart, the fight has to be bad.
Yep. We are trash merchants. This was pretty bad.
You know what? I feel that I go into every Anderson Silva fight now knowing so much what to expect that I enjoyed it. You know, I know that, I guess that's going to sound weird. I think most people hated it, but like I because it's so perfectly aligned with my expectations, I had a good time. I like seeing Anderson Silva. Like,
I mean, there's not it's not just like an expectations thing. There's also just some fun past a certain point of seeing how well someone can game the system and how well someone can game their opponents.
Absolutely.
I mean, you know, no one would ever argue that Bernard Hopkins fights late on his career were actually aesthetically appealing to watch in any way.
Right.
But
seeing him walk that tightrope.
The sheer idea of who this person is and the weight of history carried on him and how like old and ruined he is, of him watching him kind of hack the underlying nature of the sport he's in to survive. I mean, that's where the entertainment came from. And yeah, from that perspective, it was pretty entertaining because you were just like, as I'm sure you were, I mean, I was watching it thinking, could he actually do this? Could he actually trick Uriah Hall into throwing away this fight?
Yeah. I mean, even though I feel like my like actual heart prediction was always Uriah Hall, I did pick Anderson Silva, and I think you can see why, based on how this fight played out, right?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, I think I honestly think he could have taken this fight with just a few adjustments.
As I think you said on Twitter, the most important adjustment being just like try not to hurt Uriah Hall too bad. Like when he punched him in the eye, that was the point at which he had made a mistake. If he could have just kept him in that psych out zone, because genuinely, and we'll talk more about this, but like Anderson Silva, like all great aging fighters, is like still learning new things, and still like pulling out new tricks and stuff. I thought that his like combination punching was cool. Like more, it really marked a contrast between him and Uriah Hall, who basically never throws a combination if he can help it. But like at one point, Silva's like, he's throwing body jabs. He does a body jab to then a lead hook upstairs, which is a nice setup. It's like second best only to the body jab to overhand. It's what, Chino Maidana used to, knock down Adrian Broner in their fight, the jab to set up the hook. And then comes with the rear hand hook to catch him as he's trying to circle away from it. Like there was a lot of nice 2 and 3 punch, layered thinking going on from Anderson Silva here. And I think that was all possible because Hall let him command the fight so much. But yeah, like, I don't know. I like Anderson Silva. I like seeing him mentally dominate people, even when he can't really do it physically anymore.
Yeah, I mean, when I mentioned adjustments, they weren't, I don't think they were technical ones. I think that there were elements of his of a potential game plan that we called out that he didn't execute, and I think he should be, I think he should look back on that and be and think about that performance from that perspective. I don't know where the high fives and hugs were.
That's true.
I think they were pretty essential pieces. And I think specifically after he hurt Hall.
Yeah.
Because
it
was the fact that he hurt Hall, and then like he just went, and then the round ended. He just went back to his corner like a regular fighter would.
Yeah.
He should have definitely tried to defuse Hall, bring him back to the like status of being weirded out by like high-fiving him, complimenting on how well he'd done, what a great knockdown.
Yeah.
Instead, Hall was still freaked out and dangerous in the next round.
What you have to do is immediately earn Uriah's forgiveness.
Exactly.
Yeah. There was one high five in the fight. I think, did somebody get kicked low? Or it was Uriah Hall's glove. His tape was messed up and he had that adjusted, and then Anderson came in and did like 2 high fives in quick succession, and I got excited. I was like, oh, it's happening. The momentum has been broken. Anderson is going to convince Uriah Hall that they're just having fun. But no, he wanted to win the fight. I can't blame him for that, but you know. Yeah,
that was obviously the other thing is that when Silva hurt Hall, he's still Anderson Silva deep down.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he is still as, mercenary and focused as someone like, say, someone like Bernard Hopkins is.
No.
He's still a natural finisher at heart.
Yeah.
And he was just like, oh man, I can win this with a finish instead of retiring. I can retire on an Anderson Silva moment.
Yeah.
And he was like, I have to go after him. And like, he landed some really like clean telling shots. He was doing work in the clinch, and it was just bad. I just remember I said it at the beginning as I was watching it with my flatmate. I was just like, whatever he does, he has to make sure not to hurt Hall. And as soon as I saw the sequence happening, I was just like, he's doomed.
I did enjoy the clinch exchanges, though. What few of them there were. I think I myself have been guilty of underrating Silva's clinch game and like reducing it in my mind to just the double collar tie. And I think it's because like you look at that big fight with Rich Franklin, the 2 big fights, and it was like such a wake up moment for Rich Franklin. It gives me this impression that back then no one knew anything about a Muay Thai clinch. Ryan Wagner, by the way, is loving this right now. He loves the phrase Muay Thai clinch. Find him on Twitter at Ryan Wag MMA. Did I get that right?
I think so.
All right. Now make sure you
look for the cat boy.
Look for the cat boy, and make sure you just talk about the Muay Thai clinch, and make sure you're clear that you're not talking about it as a sort of, concept of this phase of fighting, like a certain way of approaching it. Make sure it's clear that by Muay Thai clinch, you mean the double collar tie.
Yes, it's a position.
Call it the plum. He loves that. But I think, I had this historical narrative in my mind of like, it only took a basic double collar tie to like shake, that era's perception of what could be done in a striking clinch. And in reality, like throughout his career, Anderson he loves the double collar tie, of course, but he's always been really good at like finding weird 2-on-1 tie-ups. And especially at transitioning out of clinch exchanges into other things, like well past his prime and at the point when it was really showing. But the finish, of Stephan Bonner is still a beautiful sequence of fighting techniques. The trip into the clinch, into the body knee is like incredible. And he was doing some stuff like that here too. He had some really nice, like, disengagement moves with the 2-on-1 control to find angles and escape safely out of the clinches. Some absolutely savage foot stomps. Maybe they just feel more savage because there's no crowd, but yeah, I don't know. I enjoyed if this was the last ride of Anderson Silva, I enjoyed it as best I think I could have.
Yeah, and as with the Bonner finish, like already keen awareness of where the cage was.
Yeah.
Like, and how to use it. Like there was a sequence where he was, I think, pinning Hall's left arm to the cage with his own shoulder, and then like was controlling Hall's. Yeah, he was doing 2-on-1 work where he was controlling Hall's wrist and elbow with his other hands, and then kind of lifted it up to knee him under the ribs.
Yeah,
which was very nice.
He reached to get that like underarm cross grip, for the 2-on-1, and like that convinced Hall that he had to fight this grip, and that's what opened him up for the knee. Really clever. Beautiful, subtle stuff that, yeah, like it's still going to be there no matter how physically degraded he may be. Okay, well, I guess we've already sort of covered this, but since nothing was surprising, what was so unsurprising about Uriah Hall's performance?
Oh, that he let it get to him.
He did. He's, you know, Phil, he really is like he's our, is it even fair to call him a control, actually? Is he the control for how good Fortis MMA really is? Or is Uriah Hall just a truly unique head case?
I think he's a truly unique head case.
Yeah. It is tough to imagine the team that would get Uriah Hall to, like, act mean in the cage, you know?
Yeah. I mean, theoretically, Cordero, I think it's just too much of a chance that he'd just burst into tears.
Yeah, no.
And run out of the gym.
Just being bullied by Cordero. No, I think Uriah Hall would knock Rafael Cordero out in sparring because Cordero goes hard. He like throws hard knees at people's bodies and stuff. I think Uriah Hall would accidentally knock Cordero out and have to leave in disgrace. And actually, I think Saif, I hope I'm not getting his name wrong. It's Saif Saud, right?
I think so.
He's the head coach at Fortis. I think he has a lot of the same qualities that have always made Cordero so effective. Like he definitely produces very confident fighters. And throughout this, I think he was doing a lot of what someone like Cordero would have done for Hall. It was a lot of constant encouragement. And like, you know, like in the first round when Silva was starting to pressure, like Uriah Hall like gets hit and then backs away, and Saif Saud's like, great job disengaging. Good champ. Like he's, you know, encouraging him for every move that he makes. And I think Cordero is kind of similar in his efforts to inspire confidence. So yeah, I just think it's probably just Uriah Hall.
I think he should go train with Henry Hooft and Team Evil. Because then he can just become single 1-round burst of terrified, panicked violence before exploding.
I think he would feel a lot like how what's the female lead in The Boys? What's her name?
The female.
You know what? Starburst, Sunburst. Something like that.
Oh, no, sorry. Starlight, yeah.
Starlight. I think the lead, you know, come on. I think.
Yeah, not the other one. I understand, yes.
I think he would have much the same experience that she has dealing with all of those soups. Like, just being surrounded by just depravity that he, on a moral level, cannot fathom.
So, in case anyone comes after us, for this, the female is actually the name of, I think, the character in the comic of the series.
That is.
I wasn't just being an insane misogynist. The character who they probably in a good move renamed Kimiko. So yes, do not.
Oh, okay. Well, I still haven't finished the first season, so I wasn't aware of that. All right. Anderson Silva's legacy. Can I say something actually about Dana White? This kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And it wasn't even, I mean, Dana White always rubs me the wrong way. You know, Luke Thomas was on Twitter. I'm not calling Luke out. I like Luke. But he was like, cause Dana White, he takes this paternalistic tone, even when he's talking about a fighter who's like, Dana White is not that much older than Anderson Silva. What is he, 10 years older?
Mm-hmm. If that.
Yeah, if that. And he still calls him the kid and stuff like that, which he does to all fighters. He has to have this, he's trying to, you know, capture this like avuncular persona while also just being a fucking dick. But Luke said something along the lines of, you know, his point was, should promoters have control of whether or not a fighter can continue fighting? And I think that's a very valid point to be making. But he was also like, I'm sure Dana White has the best interest, Anderson's best interests at heart. And I've just been thinking about that since I saw that tweet. Like, I don't think Dana White cares about Anderson Silva's health. or preserving his legacy. I think if Dana White thought that Anderson Silva was going to get out of his contract and fight somewhere else, he would quickly remind everyone of the Damian Maia and Talas Leites fights to salvage that legacy as much as he could, because that's what he does to every fighter. I think it's for him about he doesn't think there's any money left in the Anderson Silva machine for him. And Anderson still has one fight left in his contract, so he doesn't want him to go fight anywhere else. Because surely there are other promotions. Like, God knows Bellator and Bare Knuckle FC will be throwing money at Anderson Silva to get his name value. So, I don't know. It's caused me.
I think it's a combination. It's a combination of the two, right? I think because with guys like, say, Chuck, no, Dana genuinely did clearly not want him to. Yeah,
I'm sure there's part of that, yeah.
But, yeah, it was also he considered them fighters to basically be his toys. And
exactly.
That, the toys were no longer working that well, and thus it was time for them to be put back in the box.
Exactly.
They were not to be given away to other kids to use.
Yeah, it's that side of the whole paternal thing. Like, I'm sure there is some fondness for Anderson Silva in there somewhere. But it's like, I love my children as long as they obey me. That's sort of the dynamic. So I don't know. Any thoughts on Anderson Silva's legacy before we wrap this up and move on to the sadly continuing future of MMA?
I mean, I kind of wrote a little bit about this on Twitter, but I mean, increasingly, I don't really have time for any of the GOAT talk or who's the best or whatever. It seems like a really boring and soulless way of looking at the sport.
If it's not inspiring a deeper discussion about these fighters and their qualities, then it's not a fun discussion to have.
Yeah, I mean, and it's the fact that all the great careers in MMA are so starkly different from one another and all, basically involved vastly different competitive metas, and you can match up. John Jones has had an incredibly long and pretty sort of unblemished career against lots of people, but they happen to be old tiny homeless people. GSP beat up on a bunch of right-handed wrestle boxers until he fought a southpaw and was completely perplexed. Jose Aldo managed to go for a long time before feints made him before he realized that feints were the scariest thing in the world.
Right.
Everyone has these elements of criticism you can label at them. They are just careers in different shapes, and trying to plug them into a single, trying to plug them into this single quantitative rating system just increasingly feels reductive and ugly.
Yeah.
And as I said on Twitter, I think the main thing I think Anderson did was that he brought the magic back into MMA. I mean, because I was trying to think of someone before him who really did that. Because what MMA really did was it stripped the magic out, in a good way.
It's demystifying
from martial arts.
Yeah, all this phooey is fake. It's bullshito.
Yeah. It said, this is what is actually good. This is what is actually real.
Yeah.
And then you're like, oh, okay. So, and it showed this incredibly kind of grimy, bloody physical form of combat that was, incredibly compelling, but obviously extremely different to what many of us expected martial arts to be.
And kind of gross, if we're being real, And
then Anderson Silva was kind of the guy who he brought a lot of that kind of mystical martial arts vibe back to the sport for a lot of us. This thing of looking at this guy and just thinking, man, is he untouchable? Is he, it was the crazy martial arts moves, the single strike finishes, I was trying to think there was no one really before him who was anything like that.
No, all the best strikers before then they gave you this impression of being grimy, gritty brawler guys. Even great, technicians like Igor Vovchanchin. They don't do what Anderson Silva did and still does. Like, and I think that
Crow Cop is recognizably, it's recognizably technique, but it didn't have the, it wasn't the same kind of magic.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. It's the mystique of Anderson Silva that, and that's why I still enjoy these fights, is like, it has always been, I think, something mental, not a technical detail, that has separated Anderson Silva. He has a different way of thinking about himself as a fighter. Like, if you think about it, there are actually like, I should pick up his book someday, but there are sparingly few glimpses of like who Anderson Silva is compared to a lot of other champions. It's not just because of the accent. Like, I feel like I know more about Jose Aldo, his personality and his background. He talks about it more. And yeah, I think like, I don't know, just that like not being able to get in, like Anderson Silva is like he is like a distinctly open-minded guy when you do get glimpses of it. Like, he was the guy, he's the Brazilian jiu-jitsu guy who was like, I don't have problem with gay people. Like, he doesn't care. I think he's just like very calm and like serene in this way that almost by definition MMA fighters aren't supposed to be. And actually, like, I kind of really appreciate this latest stage of his career for that specific reason, because it is Anderson no longer all that like emotionally attached to the idea of winning or being champion again. He's clearly let that go and has said he's just enjoying it and wants the fans to enjoy his fights. And yeah, I don't know, maybe it's because he asked me to do it, but I do. I have enjoyed them. So, Anderson Silva, this was, by the way, the main point of an article I wrote last week and forgot to plug, which is great, Phil. I either plug something that doesn't come out or I write something and don't plug it. I've actually put out a couple of articles recently and I don't think I plugged either one of them.
I saw this one on Twitter and I was like, kind of not plug this, or did he write this in between?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
Yeah. Zane asked me to write something, so I started it. We record these on Tuesdays, and I started it on Wednesday.
Excellent.
So yeah, but it's, if you want to check that out, it's called The Next Anderson Silva. It's about, Uriah Hall and Anderson Silva, but it's really about like, the reasons that the UFC has tried so hard to recast Anderson Silva, because he was so unique and remains so unique. And so yeah, there will never be another Anderson Silva. There can't be. No one is going to come at the same time he came to the UFC, and just be so different. Like, even those guys who are following in his footsteps, they can't possibly recapture what made Anderson Silva so special. So I enjoyed my experience. I was happy to have watched it. It was a sad ending, but I literally saw it coming, and at least it was also kind of funny. That, like,
I mean, this was, I was thinking about this beforehand. It was such a martial arts kind of fight, in the way, when I was thinking in the lead up to it, I was thinking, if Anderson Silva wins this fight, will be the equivalent of one of those Aikido style masters that, you see the clips of on Twitter, where they've got like the guy sitting down and his students run up to him, and then he like twirls his hands and they do a front flip and fall over. Like, this will literally be that ritualized in a combat sport setting. Like, Anderson Silva psychically convincing the other guy to beat himself.
And he was so close.
God damn, did he get close.
He was so close. That is amazing. It really is.
Just a bit less effective. Like, if Anderson Silva had been just a little less powerful and physical, he might have won that fight.
Like, perhaps if he were 2 years older and got this
exactly.
fight, he would have accidentally won by simply no longer being able to hurt Uriah Hall. Damn it. So close to perfection.
This is the best take.
Yeah. Oh, it really, truly a series of, I'm not sure to call them unhappy or happy accidents, but certainly a series of accidents, resulted in that fight and everything that it was. All right. Well, the spider is dead. Long live the spider. Let's take a break. When we come back, it's on to light heavyweight, baby. Thiago Santos is fighting Glover Teixeira for what, would have been a very compelling, especially for us, Phil, a very compelling, number one contenders fight. and is now we're supposed to get excited for one of these dudes fighting Israel Adesanya, I guess. So that's cool. Then we're going to talk about the rest of that card. As I said, Raoni Barcelos, super exciting fighter. He's on there. A couple of others. Can't remember them all right now. We'll talk about them after this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out, the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
All right, welcome back, folks, to Heavy Hands. We are moving on to the preview section of the card. Glover Teixeira versus Thiago Santos. Or should we call this fight No Country for Old Men? Because I think both of us feel... Well, first of all, both of us, I think, genuinely have great affection for both of these fighters. Thiago Santos is the most lovable madman in the sport. He's a guy who's like I think a pretty sweethearted, fun-loving personality, but who also says things like, my ultimate goal is to deliver the utmost pain onto my opponent's body. I will break my opponent's spirit, things like that. He likes glitter and stuffed animals and blood. And then Glover Teixeira is like 70 years old. He runs a diner in Connecticut. He runs the diner that The Greek works out of, from The Wire. And yet he doesn't get rich off of his association. He's still struggling every day just to keep the goddamn counter clean. I love both these guys, and I think before now I could see a lot of arguments for how Glover Teixeira could make this competitive. I think there is still an argument, but at the moment I'm feeling that if Thiago Santos comes back having what appear to be two functioning knees, even mostly functioning, the Glover's probably not going to make it as far as he needed to make it against, say, Anthony Smith, in order to start winning that fight. What do you say, Phil?
This is both an absolutely perplexing number one contenders fight for anyone who had been following the light heavyweight division like a few years back, and one which I imagine would fill quite a few people with absolute horror.
Yeah.
The idea, if you told someone, say, 4 or 5 years ago, you were like, heavyweight division is going to have a legit, undeniable number one contenders fight between Glover Teixeira, yes, he's still around, and Thiago Santos, the guy who's probably just lost to Eric Spicely or something at this point.
I think he had. I believe he had. Yes, that was in 2016, September of 2016, so just under the wire, Phil, for that 4 years ago statement.
Excellent. So yeah, but there is, I still think, a dynamic here which can favor Glover, because his general style, I think, the way that he's been working in the light heavyweight division, is that when he gets in the cage, he sets a timer he basically activates the timer for the average light heavyweight's game to self-destruct. At what point does this person's game just reveal itself to be fundamentally degraded and flawed?
Because he's going to bring... Please go on.
And how much have they been papering over that with just a few singular violent offensive tools?
Yeah, because you can count on Glover to bring a not overwhelming but consistent. He's Jeremy Stevens, right? Consistent pressure, definitely down to fight as long as you don't put him out. That's a main difference between him and Stevens, although that may be changing even for Jeremy now. Willing to go to war and continue pressing, but also technically, you don't have to be that good to not get cornered by him. to maintain the distance from him. Like, you can get away with having Alexander Gustafsson's footwork, for example. But yeah, he is very consistent, and at light heavyweight, I think that is a massive advantage. It's just like an ability to do the same thing for 3 rounds in a row or more. So, I mean, certainly Anthony Smith can't claim that, right?
I mean, he's the good mirrored side of, what's his face? Chris Weidman's friend.
John Vellante, yeah.
John Vellante, yeah. Who will do the same thing over and over until he loses. Glover will do the same thing over and over until he wins.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful.
And so, we've seen like guys like Carl Roberson and Lauber and so on, just get eventually it will become exposed that they Nikita Krylov, for example, that just sort of really isn't quite all there. Or, Anthony Smith really was revealed that he is just a more dynamic version of the guy that he was down at middleweight with a better gas tank.
Yep.
But the essential defensive capabilities were still not there.
Yep.
So in that way, this is a fascinating matchup because Thiago Santos is not a flawless fighter. I think even me, a great Thiago Santos fan,
You're really shocking some people here, Phil.
Yeah.
Careful what you say.
And he has specifically exploded in quite a lot of ways that people who have fought Glover have.
I think, like Anthony Smith, he's likely not that different from how he was as a middleweight either.
Yeah. I mean, you can remember him getting pushed up against the cage by David Branch,
yep.
And then, just exploding. Any number of times when he got put into extended ground situations and, again, absolutely fell to pieces.
Yep.
There's a significant chance that he could get forced into a Glover fight, just get mashed up against the cage, give up some takedowns,
yep.
Try and athlete his way out of them, and then suddenly find himself in a huge amount of trouble.
Even just getting cornered by Gegard Mousasi, like not even the takedowns in that fight, but getting just backed into the fence and beaten up. Like, if he spent much of his fight with John Jones with his back against the fence.
Yeah. It was merely that, Jones is still someone who has no real idea how to strike moving forward.
Yeah.
And so, and Glover does, it's not pretty. He doesn't have cage cutting footwork of any kind whatsoever, but
right.
He does know how to punch and move forward and to do different things moving forward. He doesn't do many of them, mostly just jab, left hook, and then follow it up with the overhand.
Or the uppercut. Don't forget that right uppercut.
Indeed. That's pretty much it, but it's still there.
Mm-hmm. And there's head movement. There's basic but functional head movement that precedes and intermixes with all of these strikes. They do occasionally come in combination. Like, he's old reliable, man. He's Glover Teixeira. He's going to throw his nice 2-punch combinations and press forward, and you'd better knock him the fuck out.
Yeah. I mean, and there were arguments that Glover was kind of, looking a bit shot-born against Corey Anderson, but think in the fight since, he's just looked exactly the same as he always did.
Yeah.
Looked as durable as he ever was. I mean, Anthony Smith hit him with some hideous shots.
Right. For the Gustafsson fight, that was a brutal, prolonged beatdown. And he stood up until he had to eat 3 perfect right hands in a row. And as we have said many times in the show, Alexander Gustafsson does not always get the credit he deserves for punching power, but he is not a light hitter.
Yeah.
And remember, like, this is a Teixeira. We were talking about this just before, like, how much has Glover Teixeira actually aged? Because the feeling that precedes like a gut pick for Thiago Santos in this matchup is that he's old. But like, is he really chinnier by that much, if at all, than he was when, say, Fabio Maldonado hurt him? Or when he nearly got knocked out by Ryan Bader? Like, these kind of things have been happening.
All of these wins that he's had have generally been like tough, competitive slogs that you don't expect old guys to survive.
Yeah, right. And yeah,
a lot of them have been comebacks.
Absolutely. And maybe they're a little more competitive than they would have been before. Like there's obviously some aging, but the degree is not that big. So yeah, you also asked before though, and this is the troubling thing. You were like, remind me again, what was the defining thing that allowed Corey Anderson to just school Glover Teixeira? And my, I think appropriately reductive answer was, footwork. And you correctly pointed out, it doesn't really have to be good footwork, does it? It just has to be there.
Just has to be movement.
Exactly.
It has to be foot speed.
You can be putting yourself in terrible positions, which is, normally we would call that bad footwork. But Glover Teixeira is such a slowly drifting gunboat of a fighter, that, yeah, any amount, if you're just continually or at least frequently moving, he is going to have to continually reposition and is not going to be able to set his feet and get anything going, whether it's wrestling or striking. So that right there, whether or not Glover Teixeira is about as good as he's ever been, in the balance, that right there is enough for me to be like, yeah, Thiago Santos is going to move his feet. Even if he backs himself into the fence, he's going to swing gigantic counters, including some uppercuts and things that will probably be, this could be competitive, Phil, or he could rumble Johnson, Glover. In 30 seconds. Like that is also, I think, very likely to happen. But the mere fact that Thiago does, move his feet, and that's been a pretty present part of his game for several years now, does seem like it's going to take a long time for Glover to get going. And I think that's a considerably scarier prospect against Thiago than it is against Anthony Smith, even though Smith himself is a great finisher. Maybe I shouldn't even say that. But the idea of having to spend extended periods of time at range with Thiago Santos is always one that will make me nervous. So yeah. What about
I think that, yeah, the difference is that Smith gave something for Glover to just navigate his way through, as opposed to, say, Gustafsson.
Right.
It's that once Glover navigated his way through the jab and the right hand and the front kick and so on.
Yep.
Smith was just there for the taking. His head was straight up in the air, and he wasn't really moving back or to the side or moving much of anywhere in any direction.
Or even countering, which Thiago will do.
Yeah, Thiago will counter. He will move. He will do those together. It's not that he has the great footwork or cage awareness. Yeah, I think that the movement will just allow him to get off enough free damage on Glover. He can hurt him badly. Watching what he does when he hurts people is definitely a cause for concern against Glover Teixeira.
Right.
Like going back to Thiago's fight with Anthony Smith. The first time he hurt Smith, he wheel kicked him, and Smith kind of staggered back to the fence. And then Thiago just did like a flying knee, and then got taken, which again connected pretty cleanly, and then got taken down immediately into mount.
Right.
Which if you watch Fight Pass, if you look for Thiago on Fight Pass and you find his fight with Jan Blachowicz, the thumbnail of the two of them fighting shows Thiago upside down from what I'm sure must be a cartwheel kick.
Yes.
And something that I think I shared on Twitter lately from the youngest vaping Scooter Sprogler was him against Jimmy Manua, where he does like a kind of a beautifully balletic sequence which involves him falling straight on the floor.
Yep. He's too explosive.
Don't care.
He's too explosive. He will fly into the worst positions imaginable. However, we were looking at Thiago's stats before, and like for example, Eric Anders is credited with 6 takedowns against Thiago Santos. Gegard Mousasi is credited with 2, which for the life of me I can't find the other one. It's a 1-round fight. Gerald Mearshart is credited with 3. Almost whenever you look to investigate these takedowns, like half the time, something stupid has happened. Thiago is doing something stupid, which allows it to happen.
Yes.
But B, it almost never leads to sustained control. Now, that brings in the question of, I mean, how good is Glover's control compared to the likes of, I don't know, Eric Anders? And I would have to say it's much closer to, I think, to the Gegard Mousasi side of that scale. But even then, we didn't get to see a lot of Gegard actually having to control the position. He basically like knocked him out instantaneously after taking him down. And this makes me think of like Glover's fight with, I think you mentioned it before, Glover's fight with OSP, which is obviously a great physical parallel, this big, hyper muscular fighter who is just going to explode out of any position that he doesn't understand, which means most of them. And he did in fact have a lot of success just bench pressing Glover Teixeira off of him. Now it led to him gassing, and that's when Glover really took over the fight. But Thiago might like have a similar ability while also just having a better gas than OSP.
Yeah, that's really the one of the two transformations that Thiago's taken with him to heavyweight. Better gas and more durability.
Yeah, and like you said, Glover's success is really a product of the division in which he fights, because it really is just about being there and doing the same things, not getting finished long enough for the opponent to undo themselves. And if Thiago's not going to gas, and if Glover does have difficulty controlling these ground positions, or rather, if he has difficulty in turning the scramble into a position, that's really the struggle against Thiago, then it just seems like a lot of time for Thiago Santos to find something. So I am going to still pick Thiago, but it's still an interesting fight. I just wish it were for I want to see one of these guys fight Jan Blachowicz, and that means I'm going to have to. I have to expect Jan to beat Israel Adesanya now for that to happen.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that I know that you were thinking about, you kind of want Glover to win because he's older, and
yeah,
but now you don't anymore.
God, would they even do it? Would they make Glover fight Israel Adesanya? I can't think of anything
like that. They're cruel like that, Connor. They'd do it.
I can't think of anything more cruel than that. That is savage behavior. Okay, let's talk about one of these.
Thiago Santos against Israel Adesanya, on the other hand.
That sounds awesome. I think that sounds great. Like, he'll probably just get instantly knocked out and it'll be a big disappointment, but come on.
Yeah. He would get knocked out trying like a cartwheel, reverse flying knee.
Yeah. He would try to do like one of those like Street Fighter moves where it's a series of wheel kicks with no break between them. Just four repeating, just pirouetting on one foot.
Yeah. People would be like, oh, this is the most technical guy you've ever fought. And he'd be like, yeah, I know what technique is.
In fact, the game plan would include technique. Lots of it. And then 3 minutes before stepping into the cage, Thiago would say, listen, coach, I think I'm going to try to murder this guy by becoming fully insane. And his coach is going to say, believe in yourself, Thiago. Yeah, I do want to see that one. So that is another reason, I think, to hope for Thiago to win. He'll probably do something unspeakably violent to Glover, but then at least Israel Adesanya won't like humiliate Glover. So I'll take it. And on that, I was going to say let's do another, but why don't we take one more break? When we come back, we've got Hani Barcelos versus Khalid Taha. I think that'll be a very exciting fight on this undercard. Our boy Ian Heinisch versus Brendan Allen, who has, it feels, you know what, it doesn't hurt as much, Phil, to think about Brendan Allen beating Kevin Holland, because I think we can now safely say he's actually quite good. We're going to talk about those two fights, maybe a couple others, and then look back at what still needs covered from last weekend's event. After this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are one or two of you that don't fit that description, you know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. You can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Heavy Hands. Let's go ahead and talk about some of these fighters on this upcoming undercard. At bantamweight, Raoni Barcelos is fighting Khalid Taha. As I said before, I'm not sure that we've actually, maybe we talked about Raoni Barcelos once, pretty briefly on this show. But I feel like bantamweight is just so full of incredible fighters, like it is actually kind of difficult for other exciting super athlete, bricked up Brazilians, as you would put it, Phil. It's kind of difficult for them to stand out. So I feel like, I don't know, nobody talks about Raoni Barcelos as like a good fighter, but he's fucking awesome. He's really, really explosive. Like, we're talking Jose Aldo style athleticism. And I don't just say that because he kind of looks like him. But he's also like, a devoutly well-rounded fighter in the mold of like a Rory McDonald or a Jorge Masvidal, in that he never wants to just beat somebody up, even though he loves throwing big, powerful punches. And if you saw his UFC debut, you saw him land just a comical cartoon style uppercut to knock out, the beleaguered Kurt Hollabaugh. Despite that, and the savage low kicks that he also possesses, he takes everyone down and loves to, he just likes it to be a factor, I think, in his fights, but also he will happily take a submission, if it is given to him. So I really enjoy Raoni Barcelos' style. Phil, you enjoy Khalid Taha. I mean, I like him too, but I'm going to let you describe Khalid Taha to our listeners.
I mean, he's just a big, bricked up, violent dude.
Punch man.
I think one of the interesting questions for this fight is, can he really make bantamweight, like, with any consistency?
Oh yeah,
because he wasn't I never looked at him and thought, oh, yeah, that guy's a small featherweight.
You're right. He missed for the Bruno Silva fight, didn't he?
Did
137. He weighed in 1 pound over for the fight before that. And against Nad Narimani, that was at featherweight. So yeah, good question. Worth asking.
Yeah, I think he's bounced back and forth between the two of them, over the years, but he's a big muscular guy.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I feel like the bantamweight thing is probably an attempt for him to compensate for some, like, fairly clear wrestling deficiencies.
Yes.
I mean, he can sprawl on, like, fairly telegraphed takedowns, but still got, like, a bad tendency to just give up the body lock, and just try and muscle and cardio his way out of things, which I think, really came back to hurt him in the Nad Narimani fight. And I think that's probably a reasonable enough agree for Barcelos in that, although Barcelos is not as, like, he's not going to confront. I mean, Taha against Narimani, Taha was kind of confronted by himself, but with skill in the one area that he lacked. I think Barcelos is probably like more of a range striker, but is still like someone who will fight in the clinch and on the ground and do all the stuff that Taha likes to. He's just got like a technical edge pretty much everywhere. The only thing I'm interested to see is like how much does like Taha's just pure physicality translate.
And it's bound to be a factor because Barcelos is the thing I like about him most. And this is what it takes, by the way. Any hyper athletes out there wanting to earn the, just much sought after admiration of some guy in a basement in Ohio. Here's what you got to do. Be a big athletic freak, but also have a thought every now and then. Raoni Barcelos is a clever fighter. But the byproduct of that, Like I think his adaptability is really one of his best attributes. It was like watching him figure out how to win a decision against Said Nurmagomedov, for example. Trying all of the various tools in his arsenal and then sort of narrowing it down to the things that were working more and more as the fight went on. The byproduct of that approach is that he does tend to take a little time in the early going of a bout. Even when he's pressuring, he'll do it from a safe distance, lots of feints. Another reason I compare him to Aldo is that it's a lot of like suggestion of offense. And when he does go, it's like nonstop explosion all the time. He is a full power striker. But like Aldo, he sets up all of that crazy commitment with like a lot of subtlety at range. And that means taking time to look at the opponent and read their feints and their strikes and movements and figure out what the best tools are. And so, yeah, like basically I think when I pitched this to you, Phil, my summation of the matchup was, I think this is going to be absolutely thrilling until Raoni Barcelos, just takes Kali Taha down. And I do think his wrestling is going to be the turning point in this fight. I agree with your assessment that Taha is likely, somewhat unsuccessfully chasing this bantamweight spot because, a not particularly incredible athlete in Nad Narimani was able to just cleanly out wrestle him at 145. And, I think we saw granted he missed weight, he came in at 137, but in Taha's fight with, Bruno Silva, he did stuff a lot of takedowns in the first layer, when it was still, like an explosive, scrambly type of engagement. He was really good, tight whizzers, quick hips, throwing Bruno Silva off of him. It wasn't until round 2 when Silva hit, I think, I might be wrong, a clean double leg, like a reactive shot, and just got him down. No, actually, I'm remembering it was a single. It was a crackdown finish on a single.
Oh yeah.
Forcing Taha to rely on his balance. And once that happened and he did end up on his back, Bruno Silva enjoyed significant top control for much of the rest of that round. So I think the strength parity that he has in this division does help him, but not only is Barcelos just as strong, but he's does really well-timed, well-considered takedowns. So I'm thinking like crazy punch exchanges round 1, end of round 1 or round 2, clean reactive double leg as Taha comes charging forward. And then, man, Raoni Barcelos' back-taking game is so pretty to watch. Watching him successfully stop Said Nurmagomedov from scrambling out of his back mount, even when it seemed clear that he was just about to lose the position and still managing to shift his weight and remain on top. I think Taha's going to end up in serious trouble when it goes to the ground.
Agreed.
Okay. Well, there's that main card fight. Let's go ahead and talk about one of our it is crazy now that I think of it, how little we've discussed someone like Raoni Barcelos. And yet I think we've talked about Ian Heinisch every time he's fought. Which we have a sickness. The middleweight division is one of the few substances on earth more addictive than heroin and fentanyl combined. And we can't kick it. But Ian Heinisch, how do you not want to talk about this guy? His style is kind of dumb. It's the fights aren't even all that exciting. It's great. He's a real middleweight star. And I think he is genuinely a great test for Brendan Allen. I really like this piece of matchmaking because he's the built-in a lab fighter for him. Yeah. He's the I only beat you if you try endlessly to take me down guy. Huh? That's how he exhausts people. And I want to say, I compared him to Bryce Mitchell, who I think we'll talk about in a minute. And I compared both of them to Khabib because Khabib really did kind of set the standard for the new, pressure grappling wrestling meta in MMA. The game that Khabib plays, all of those positional elements, Just the general approach to pinning people against the fence, like that is a very important part of Khabib's success, because using the fence to get up is so important to so many fighters in any division. It's a real defining sort of thing. We're going to see a lot of iterations of Khabib's game going forward. And the thing that I notice about it, with less so with Khabib, because he's such a freak, but definitely with both Bryce Mitchell and Brendan Allen, it's a very, very energy-intensive way of fighting. There's a reason wrestling matches are, 9 minutes? Grappling matches are about the same, I think, even at the black belt level. Are they 10, 11 minutes, something like that? But wrestling in particular is exhausting. It's a huge commitment of energy. And the bigger you get, the more exhausting it gets, because you are moving your entire body around in these explosive movements. The difference in energy expenditure between even your hardest right hand and a relatively lackadaisical double leg, I think, is still pretty profound, just because of how much mechanical, effort it requires to actually complete the maneuver. And so, yeah, the idea of Brendan Allen having to take down Ian Heinisch, because it's all he does, and Heinisch being able to beat him in the scrambling stage is really interesting, because how many times can Brendan Allen, if he doesn't, just shock us all by completely owning Heinisch in the scrambles, which he might. I do think he's pretty fucking good at the whole pressure into predictable transitions thing. But if he can't, I want to see what happens if he starts to gas, basically. What do you say?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, because the people that Allen has fought have all been those who have sort of... It's so fascinating, because Allen has been beating people who have chosen to engage with him.
Yes.
Kevin Holland and Tom Breeze are sort of notorious for being people who have too much confidence in their ability to fight off their back.
Yep, and Kyle.
Their ability, but the same is obviously true of Ian Heinisch. But the thing of Ian Heinisch is that he's historically been right.
Yes, I'll point out too that Kyle Daukaus, who I think is also a pretty good recent addition to the middleweight division, and his weird flabby brother has been knocking people out up at heavyweight. So, Kyle Daukaus also clearly, as a product of his training, even when his corner told him no more takedowns, could not stop engaging Allen in the wrestling game, and was otherwise kind of cleaning his clock on the feet, actually. Was kind of taken into school when they had exchanges, but clearly his training has caused him to think that every exchange should lead to a shot, and that is what he did even into the third round of that fight. So literally everyone Allen has fought has insisted on not just engaging him in the grappling, but putting a grappling game on him.
Yep. I just can't shake the fact that this is not the way to beat Ian Heinisch. Even aside from the fact that, in his very, very brief exchange with Gerald Meerschaert, Ian Heinisch looked like he had a better idea of what to do on the feet than he has previously.
Yeah. Hard to say. Only a minute, but yeah, I agree.
It was still Ian Heinisch stuff.
Of course.
I've compared the two fighters. Anthony Hernandez versus Chris Gritzmacher.
Mm-hmm.
When you're like, oh wow, these guys are galactically far apart in terms of their level of athleticism. This guy did look better against him, but it probably doesn't mean very much.
Hey, you can take the fighter out of the Sumerian pit fighting pits, but you can't take the Sumerian fighting pits out of the fighter.
Yeah. But looking back at Allen's records, Eric Anders has got to be the specific one which jumps out at you, right?
Yes.
Because Eric Anders is also an incredibly negative fighter, which is what Heinisch, unfortunately, much as we love him, kind of is.
Mm-hmm.
He just takes what you give him, and that's sort of what Anders is. He was just a big bricked up brick wall.
Yep.
That's Allen got exhausted against. He did have some success against him, but I think it was just the fact that Allen clearly, as you sort of alluded to at the beginning, got exhausted grappling with Anders, that he got clipped coming out of grappling exchanges with him. He jumped for the neck and just got thrown off. Yeah, I think it's just a rough matchup for him, like a specifically rough matchup. It's that, like, in the same way that, like, Shoeface,
right?
You know, Heinisch is probably like the worst guy. No offense to Ian Heinisch, that Shoeface could possibly lose to, because the style matchup is just that bad for him.
Yep, it is the specific counter. Now, I do think, like, I don't know. I have seen Brendan Allen in the scrambles, in the transitions, do some really, really impressive things. Like, I will say, up to this point, like Kyle Dalkaus made mistakes in continuing to engage actively in a wrestling phase with him, but that doesn't mean that Allen wasn't doing impressive things to turn those exchanges in his favor. But I also suspect that I haven't seen it. But one of his other 3 losses is to Trevin Giles, who also sort of fits this mold of, like, this isn't even a stylistic thing, but just being a freaky athlete thing. Ian Heinisch, Eric Anders, Trevin Giles are all, in varying degrees and in different ways, but they're all physically imposing fighters. And that is not a sense I've ever gotten from Brendan Allen yet. So
it is also, in his defense, it is also worth pointing out that these were fights in the first 3 years of Brendan Allen's pro career, and he's only 5 years in. So, you know, he is still a very impressive.
Just like Bryce Mitchell, I think he may have some prodigal improvement. And we may have already been seeing some of it, because certainly I can recall that idiot Zane Simon convincing me before the fight with Kevin Holland that, you know, he was going to engage with Kevin Holland in these scrambles and he was going to lose the way Mearshart did. And no, he actually, like, Mearshart is also, by the way, a venomous submission grappler. Willingly engaging on the ground with him was a very stupid idea from Kevin. And you can see with just simple MMA math the difference in how those 2 grappling matches played out. So yeah, I do think Brendan Allen is very good, and I think he's going to have some performances where he really shocks us by pulling new things out of his back pocket. But the time being, I think I'm going to pick Heinisch. I think it's the way to go.
I think it's one where he's got to show us something different.
Right.
Either he's got to show us another level of kind of grappling control. Because even Bronson, he couldn't really control Heinisch on the floor. He just got takedowns on him, but wasn't really able to do much with them. Got to show us either another level of control, or he's just got to be a better striker than he has been. A more consistent. He's got to be able to win a consistent striking match.
Yep. I do think he's a different level of control from those other guys, but maybe not compared to Shoeface, you know.
Yes.
Okay, well, I think that is more than enough for this week's edition of Heavy Hands. Thank you all so much for listening. Once again, I will ask you to check out my Anderson Silva article from last week. It's called simply The Next Anderson Silva. And I was pretty happy with how it turned out. It's not really analysis. It's more of a sort of, a look at the legacy and, you know, why we're so desperate to have another Anderson Silva and so on and so forth. So go ahead and check that out on bloodyelbow.com. I may have a Teixeira Smith article coming this week, but I do not want to plug it till it comes out. So this will probably be the 3rd week in a row in which I produce an article and don't actually mention it by name on the show, which is great. That's professional marketing right there. Phil, anything coming out from you?
Nothing written, although I will say, I did enjoy that Anderson Silva article a lot.
Thank you.
We're up to Anderson Silva, what is it, 5 or 6 now?
I think 5, yeah, and I'm sure there's been a lot of other passing Anderson Silvas that it just didn't stick.
Yeah. But I did join Dan Tom of MMA Junkie on the Protect Your Neck podcast, where we did the top 5 unluckiest fighters in MMA history.
Damn it, Dan. He made me do top 5 left hook knockouts. Yours is way more fun.
He asked me what I would like to do, so I picked a cool topic.
Damn it. He didn't give me that choice. What the fuck? What am I, chopped liver?
Yeah. But he did say that he really enjoyed doing that boring topic with you.
Oh yeah. Well, I had fun too. No, I'm just.
But yeah, so I'm not sure whether that's actually going to be out this week because I think Dan's on holiday, so it might be scheduled a bit later. But yeah, keep a lookout for that one. It was a lot of fun, like going back, looking through all the incredibly hard done by people in MMA history and forgetting about people and then having them come back and like.
I'll go ahead and give him the detailed plug because I like Dan. Dan's a good guy, good analyst. He said on Twitter, he addressed it. There's going to be an episode with Ben Cohn of the Fight Site this week, and then your episode with him is coming out the week after. So in 2 weeks after you hear this, make sure you check out Phil on the Protect Your Neck podcast. And make sure if you didn't hear us discussing, an hour and 50 minutes or so of fights on this episode, you check out the Heavy Hands Patreon, where there will be a bonus episode with the offcuts. Don't think of them as offcuts. Think of them as things that are simply too good to be free. And otherwise, find us on social media. You can find Phil at Evil Greg Jackson, myself at Boxing Bush, BUSCH. That's on Twitter.com, of course. And until next week, thank you all once again for listening. If you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.